what's up, guys? It's good to be back with y'all again at Homes as we're looking through the Sermon on the Mount this semester. This week, we're going to be looking at the heart, and it's very similar to what we looked at last week when we talked about anger and these feelings that we can feel in our hearts. And so I think that you're going to see that what we're looking at this week is very similar. And so we're going to be in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 30. I'll let you pause so that y'all can turn there, but I'm going to go ahead and read this. It says, this is verse 27. It starts by saying, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell." And what I don't want y'all to do is I don't want you to hear all of these things, cut off your hand, take out your eye. I don't want you to hear this and think, "Jesus, you're being really dramatic. Like, this doesn't apply to me. This isn't important." That's what I don't want you to do, because it is important. It does apply to you. And I think that if Jesus is taking something this seriously, then we should as well. And that's because the things that we allow in our hearts, the feelings that we allow to dwell in there, these feelings that Jesus is describing of lust and this desire, when we let that come into our hearts and we let it dwell in there, even if we don't act on it, even if we don't commit adultery, it's not good enough just not to commit adultery. Jesus is telling us don't allow these things on our heart, because even if we don't act on it, it shows up in the things that we do and say and the way that we treat people, and it becomes evident in our lives. And I mean, what starts in our heart is going to overflow into every part of our lives. So it's important for us to take this advice from Jesus and take it seriously.
Yeah, and I think this whole series is all about the good life. And we started weeks ago with the Beatitudes, and we talked while we were at the Hive, both MSM and HSM, we talked about how important it is for us to recognize that the life that Jesus is telling us we can live in is different than what this world offers us. And so with this specifically, we're ultimately going to be talking today about how Jesus transforms our hearts inwardly and our lives outwardly. And so what we're going to be talking about first is the fact that Jesus transforms our hearts inwardly. So before we even dive in, before we get started about how that connects with this text, we want y'all to spend some time as a small group answering this question. What does it look like for our hearts to be transformed inwardly?
All right, guys, so y'all just took some time and y'all talked about what does it look like to have your heart transformed by God, by Jesus. And we're going to talk about why that's important. Why do you need for your heart to be transformed by Jesus? And part of that, and part of what we see here, is that we have a sinful nature. We were born sinners. No, you don't have to teach a baby to take the toy from someone else that they're playing with. That's just how we are. That's who we are without Jesus. And what we see here is this description of lust. It's talking about lusting after a woman. And I want to take some time and talk about how this is different than just attraction. Attraction is good, and it's given to us by God. But what happens with lust is when we take this thing that God gave us and our natural sinful desire twists it, and we twist it into something that God didn't intend for it. And it's, I see something, I see someone, I notice, oh wow, they're attractive, and then I want it, but it's not mine. But I don't care. I want it, and so I take it. And that's what this lust is here that Jesus is describing. It's us and our sinful nature taking what God designed for good, attraction, and creating this distorted image of what God wants for us in lust. And that's why we need to be transformed, because this is our nature.
And ultimately, I think the shift in that is we go from, like Carson said, what God created for our good, for us to do and live in, and God created attraction. We take a good thing that God created and we make it about us. We make it about what we want, what our eyes see. We go out and we get it. And when I think about just this idea of desire, and even like Carson mentioned, our sinful nature is to live like the world lives. It's to be worldly and to just go after what we want. And so God created us to be humans who desire things and who want things. And I mean, you look at Adam and Eve, and you look at all these examples in the Bible of people who fell short, but they were given the opportunity to desire the things that God wanted them to desire. And so with this, this just reminds me of my own life. And I feel like each and every one of you watching this video, at some point you've struggled with this idea of, okay, I know God wants me to take what I want to him, but we still make those things about us. And something I want to challenge y'all with, all of our students with, is, do we equate God's care for us to what he gives us? And so as we're lusting after these things that we want, as we desire this friendship or this status in our schools or this sports team or this relationship or this friendship, as we are deeply desiring and we're placing our worth in receiving those things, what are we starting to believe about God? I think we start to believe that if he doesn't give us those things, he doesn't care for us. Or if he does give us those things and they don't meet the expectation, then he's wrong. When ultimately everything that God gives us is good. And here we have parameters set around things that is our sinful nature. We need help dealing with these things because we don't know how to fight these things on our own. We need God to come in and put parameters around these things so that we can live in this good life in the way that he wants us to live. And so ultimately, as our hearts are transformed, when we fall into temptation, when we lust, when we have these desires that are morphed, when we allow God to come into those things, he ultimately changes the way that our lives look outwardly. And so that's the next thing we're going to talk about, is how Jesus transforms our lives outwardly as he transforms our hearts. So the next question we want y'all to take some time to answer is this: what does it look like for our lives to be transformed outwardly?
So y'all just spent some time talking in your small groups about what it means to be transformed outwardly in the way that you live and the way that you treat other people. And that's great. I hope y'all had great conversations. But what I want to do is I want to tell you that if you want to be transformed in your heart inwardly by Jesus, that's great. That's awesome. It's great that you want that. And if you want to be transformed outwardly, again, great. I love that these are things that you want. But we have to start by being transformed by Jesus. And what that means for us is that means death. That means dying to our old self every day. That means that the old Carson doesn't live anymore. The Carson who was selfish, the Carson who was rude, the Carson who was impatient with people, my desires that I had, my sinful desires that I still have, that means I have to die to those every day, that I have to give up what I want in my heart, and I have to pursue what Jesus wants for me in the life that he is telling us here, like we're talking about this whole time, the good life. In order to live the good life, I have to die. The way that I lived, I can't live anymore. I have to die to my sins, and I have to choose to pursue the Lord every day. And it's only when we let ourselves be transformed inwardly that's going to affect the way that we act outwardly and the way that we treat other people.
So ultimately, our relationship with Jesus is between us and him, not us and the world, and then we bring him in when we need him. It's about us and him. And so ultimately, as we follow him, as we learn more about him, as we struggle with sin and temptation and desire and lust and comparison and all the things that we could struggle with, as we walk through those things should draw us nearer to Jesus because we recognize our need for him. And so as we decide to bring him into those things, that's when we'll see our outward lives start to change. We'll see an effect in how we talk to the people around us. We'll see an effect in how we respond to our parents and them disciplining us, or even our teachers disciplining us. We'll react to how we want to live for Jesus more than we want to live for this world. And so I think something that Carson and I want y'all to take away from this lesson is sexual temptation and desires and lust and sin. Our sinful nature is really real and it's really present. And the way that our lives can be transformed outwardly is not by us getting rid of all those things and thinking that they're never going to come back. We have to invite Jesus into those things so that he can transform our lives outwardly, because it's not within ourselves that we're able to muster up all of these awesome ways of Christian living. We can't muster up the good life for ourselves. We have to let the Lord in, Jesus in, to shape our hearts so that we desire to be different in the way that we live our lives.
Yeah, and I love that you said that. It's not something that we can just figure out all of these things that are wrong with us and just fix them. Like, man, I just want to fix myself. It's something that, when we have these sinful desires in our heart, we have to let the Lord into that, and we have to let him wash us clean. And that's hard, and that's something that I struggle with a lot, and it's something that you have to decide to do every single day. And guys, I know that this was a lot to cover in a short period of time, but I hope that y'all get to have good conversations with your leaders. Ask them questions on things that we didn't get to talk about and to cover. We love y'all. We hope that this time is good for you. And we love getting to talk to y'all. We hope that y'all get to live the good life. We hope that that's something that you desire. Love you guys.